So we just did a really exciting kind of first impressions blindfold test that I've never seen before in sim racing, where Richard from SimLab put his new, now I know it's this one, SimLab direct drive wheelbase up against another direct drive wheelbase, which is the SIMIQ 2 Pro, in a blind test, and just asked me what my thoughts were, which I put there in a separate video. But this is such a cool idea, Richard, and I've never seen anyone else do it. So I just want to understand kind of how it happened and how you're able to do this, because I guess you've got the same SimLab wheel on the front.
Yeah.
So was the QR system, did it all kind of work and you're able to...
Yeah, of course. I think, you know, setting up the two sims is not hard to do. And obviously we want to make a neutral as possible comparison, you know, and this idea originated from us talking and we decided to go ahead with it. And comparing force feedback bases is obviously really complicated because you're talking about a lot of technical stuff or you're talking about a lot of subjectivity.
Yeah.
And it's all in a mix. Everything is mixed, so you got every sim that has a different type of force feedback. So to make a very objective comparison is difficult, but we tried, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I could not tell visually the difference. Obviously, when I tried them, I could immediately tell a difference. And then I was trying to work out, okay, is this difference, what does this difference really mean, which we could talk about later. But I know you also chose to put iRacing on. Is there a reason you chose iRacing in terms of the way it outputs data? You thought it's a good one?
I think, you know, different reasons. Our customer base are the people that play iRacing, which is really important. I think the force feedback is really good in iRacing. That's also one big aspect, and you know, you need to make a choice. So we chose iRacing to do this comparison. And
then another thing is that we whack down all the filters basically on both, as I understand it.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of wheelbases come out the box with presets applied. Would you recommend, for example, but you can't recommend anything on behalf of SIMIQ?
No, for sure not.
But on SimLab, would you recommend people, when they get this, they drive it out the box without filters, or?
Well, you know, my opinion about it is that the force feedback signal that comes out of the game is how it's meant to be. You know, so everything you're going to do with it, enhance it or alter it, is ultimately not really how it's meant to be. So, and I think at the moment we are in an era where force feedback is really good. You know, so for example, you tried it without any filters, the force feedback is great. But on the other side, there's always a place for people wanting to alter, wanting to play around with settings, damping, inertia, all kinds of other filters.
So my honest opinion is that because it's literally a blind test, I would not have wanted to have applied any filters to what I was experiencing. But I can guarantee that if I had this at home, I would be messing around with filters, which is quite interesting. So maybe you can have a recommendation, like try this without filters first and then see what happens.
For sure. You know, we're obviously going to do filters. That's one thing we certainly do, but we don't create a force feedback signal. You know, we just translate it the best we can.
And in terms of like setting up the wheel rotation and things like that, it's all a field of view. You know how to do that, and you have that's objectively, it should be the right thing for the car, etc.
Yeah, all the basic settings basically are, you know, that you need to have.
And in terms of the wheelbase power as well, the SimLab is 26, I think.
26 and then.
SIMIQ 25. Did you adjust the power, like, because no one normally runs those at 100%? Like,
yeah, right. We adjusted it so it feels more or less the same, but because then again, you know, if you're trying to be theoretical about it and say, okay, SIMIQ is 25, I take 60% of that. Yeah. I put it on the slider, and then you sit in the sim, and then you're, oh, wait, now
feels different, strong.
The forces are much higher. So we just try to equalize the forces more or less. We managed that, and for this test at least.
Was there anything else interesting that you noticed in the process of doing this very unique setup that was like, oh, that's interesting? Or...
Yeah, I think the biggest, most notable difference between the two wheelbases at the moment is that SIMIQ has a 2-pass filter applied out of the box.
Which is this kind of like, it can you can separate a track and of the force feedback and then change it.
It's filtering out all the small details and putting it on a separate track.
And is that hardware or software?
It's software.
It's purely software.
Yeah. It's a very common filter actually. It's used in many different industries or applications where you want to filter out noise, or just to basically filter it out, or just to, in this case, amplify the noise, which generate texture and so.
And that's a subjective thing that people may experience.
It is.
Okay. Yeah. Would you personally?
I wouldn't. No.
Use it
me personally not, but you know, yeah,
it's another option for people to kind of use.
Yeah, it's an option, and we will have something similar.
I mean, as I said in the blind test video, that there'll be a link below this. I felt like on the SimuCube, it had this kind of haptic-y road feel and curves and vibration, but then that muddied I don't want to overemphasize, but muddied slightly when I'm entering a corner, because there's already a force level that I'm experiencing, and therefore the difference in the load versus was not maybe as great as it could be.
Clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, we do obviously on YouTube, we do a lot of audio and color grading and stuff like that, and sometimes there's a strong blue light here, we might lower the blue light and things like that, and that you start to then make things a little bit artificial. Whereas within the SimLab, I did feel like, and there's two ways of interpreting this, but let's say I'm approaching a fast corner and I'm riding the curb on the outside, I'm not having this whole vibraty, like haptic-y on the curb.
Right.
But then when I turn in, because I'm starting from a more pinprick kind of like feeling, I get the load immediately and I feel the tire. You have to let me know in the comments section. I'm trying to explain stuff that's very difficult to explain, and people don't often do this because it's difficult. Some people like having a bass shaker on their rig and haptics on their pedals and 6-degree motion. And it's like, whoa, yeah. And some people want to, I feel like I would be faster on the SimLab. That's probably a controversial thing to say, but I feel like feeling where you are in the forced feedback is, I remember going from a THRUSTMASTER T150 to a Fanatec CSL, and I was like, oh, I can feel it a bit more. And then from a CSL to a DD, and then different levels of DD. But I wonder, therefore, if the performance is something where that, I think you say clarity is something that a performance driver is really want to, what am I feeling? Have I turned in a bit too early? Have I carried in a little bit too much speed? Are the tires a little bit more worn this lap than I thought? It's
that clarity or that change in force feedback while you're in a corner, you know, so you can, at least on, you know, I believe on the SimLab, you can very well feel the alternating states, you know, inside of a corner. And there is also a lot of headroom. So basically, you know, you can go into a corner, have a really good holding torque where you also can still feel the slight variances while going through the corner. But then if you hit a curb, you know, there's a lot of also headroom to have a really big jolt.
Even more.
Yeah. On top of that.
Like we were racing at Laguna Seca, and often you'll turn in, feel it, but then you might have turned in too early and you're going to hit that sausage curb, and then you still get that.
And then you get that big jolt.
And then on the exit, because now the car's unloaded, you need to feel that counter steer kind of.
Yeah, that's bleeding off. Or, so, you know, we describe it as a dynamic range from having really small details in your force feedback to going all out, all jolting, like big hit on your...
So I find that really interesting when you say dynamic range, because I think a lot of people will understand dynamic range from other things they might be interested in, like music or whatever. I feel like either you have a choice of, I want to compress the force feedback, so you're always feeling something. Or I want to have dynamic range, which means you feel in the important moments, but then sometimes you don't feel because it has to keep that relative, a bit like a load cell, you're feeling the pressure, like it has to keep that relativity.
I think, you know, then what dynamic range adds, end of the day, is clarity on the low end, you know, so small details are just small details. And then still enough distinction between hitting a sausage curb or running over a rumble strip, or that's just, it's a big difference, and it kind of makes it richer, the whole force feedback experience.
Is that why you're going up to 39? Because does that give you more dynamic range?
Well, I think there are a couple of other reasons to do that, and like I said earlier, you know, we cannot disclose everything at this moment, which sounds a little bit secrecy,
but generally, just having more Newton meters, does that allow you to have more dynamic range?
More overhead.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's incredible that you've put this together, and you know, I'm not paid to be here. SimLab are paying for my flights, but this is not a sponsored video, and it's been really cool to be a part of this blindfold test. I think there should be a lot more of this in the sim racing industry, and I think we should all, especially you watching, should kind of demand this a bit more often, because otherwise there can be a lot of marketing and things that we don't really question. You'll know in my reviews, I'm not technical enough to question all of these marketing claims, and it's not like medicine or something where there's regulators, so people can say whatever they want, and the marketing can often win out. So to see a blind test, I think it would be completely fair to allow SimuCube to set up their wheelbase and do it the other way around. So maybe we'll put that to SimuCube. And I'd love to see other brands do this and start to have a real discussion about what is good force feedback.
Maybe we can drop a bomb, you know, in a way like, you know, if I would say like encoders don't play a role almost at all in the force feedback
you said
quality.
These higher bit encoders that are coming.
Higher bit encoders cannot change anything. There's a couple of problems with it, and there's a lot of misunderstanding, I believe, in the whole sim racing community, where people think that a 24 bits encoder is making any difference. It doesn't.
It sounds better.
It doesn't. It sounds better, but if you really don't understand how force feedback works, then it might be a very, you know, like appealing thing, or not sure how to...
Buzzword or something.
Yeah, buzzword like, okay, the way that force feedback inherently works is that the position of your wheel in such a small increments just doesn't play a role in the controlling.
Around 300, around the rotation.
Yeah. So the 1/10,000th of a degree differences that a very high bit encoder can measure doesn't play a role in how the motor is controlled.
So you actually,
sorry, but the motor is controlled with a torque factor, and whether your wheel is positioned at 1/1000th of a degree left or right doesn't influence the torque factor at all, almost. So there's a couple of misunderstandings around that whole subject, where, you know, it's seen as a very important spec for a direct drive wheel. Which
there we go. That is a bombshell. I mean, that specific thing about encoders is I don't think it's discussed on any level. I think often the way that YouTubers are given products to review, there will be a spec sheet, and I know a lot of people will just read off the spec sheet. I mean, I try not to pretend that I know too much about stuff I don't know about, but arguably that's also not great. So it's really cool to do this, Richard, and hopefully we can do more things like this, because it's really powerful to kind of do a blind test and break things down to feelings, actually.
It is, because without side-by-side comparison, it's very difficult. Because you can go home now and jump on your own cockpit, and, you know, it's very hard to remember, like, how was this force feedback of the SimLab one or the SimuCube one? It's very difficult to do comparisons.
Yeah, and they're expensive products, so you want to kind of know that you're making the right decision. Well, thanks so much, Richard, and thanks for putting it together.
No problem. It was great.